John Wycliffe is the subject of our first panel. The translation of the Bible associated with John Wycliffe was not the first English translation. For that, we have to look back to the Venerable Bede in the 7th century Northumbria and his fragmentary translation of the Scriptures, of which nothing remains. But more about Bede later. Wycliffe supervised and assisted in the work of translation, but it is doubtful if he did much of the work himself. We know he had collaborators. Nicholas Hereford, for example, translated the major part of the Old Testament from Latin, and it was a very literal translation. The New Testament first appeared about 1380, and the whole work was finished in 1382, 2 years before Wycliffe's death in 1384. Within 4 years after his death, a revision of the translation by John Purvey, a pupil of Wycliffe's, had appeared. So what we have then is the first complete translation from Latin of the Scriptures into English in 1382. There was a second edition of the translation, largely the work of John Purvey, Wycliffe's former collaborator and secretary. Both versions circulated, but their popularity, indicated by the number of manuscripts remaining, is apparent. Both appeared about 100 years before printing was introduced into England by William Caxton. Not until 1731 was Purvey's New Testament printed. Then in 1848, the earlier New Testament, and finally in 1850, the entire Wycliffe Bible. Wycliffe was condemned as a heretic at the Council of Constance in 1415. In 1448, by order of the Pope, his remains were dug up, publicly burned, and his ashes scattered on the waters of the stream near his home. When we turn our attention to the panel here, the top part shows the coat of arms of the Wycliffe family in Yorkshire. The middle panel here shows Wycliffe sending out preachers against the background of Oxford, where he was a fellow and briefly master of Balliol College. The bottom section of the panel shows Lutterworth Church in Leicester, where Wycliffe ministered in his last days. The dedication of this panel is to Samuel Hume Blake, who died in 1914 and was one of the founders of this college, and for many years its honorary treasurer, prolific author, and in his time the most prominent Anglican layman in Canada. Two major events happened between Wycliffe and the next major translation. First, in 1453, the Turks captured Constantinople, causing many Greek scholars to escape to the west, to which they brought many Greek manuscripts of the Bible. Second, in 1454, Gutenberg invented the printing press, allowing the potential to print multiple copies of the Bible instead of being laboriously copied by hand in manuscript, as it had been up until then. With these two factors in play, Erasmus published the first Greek text of the New Testament in 1519. The first part of Luther's Bible translation into German came in 1522. It is surprising that there was not more activity in Bible translation in England as a result. This was because it was prohibited out of the fear that the reformers would introduce heresy into their translations.